Stone Cold Prose, Building Better Words.
Stephen King once famously remarked that television was a bottomless pit of shit. And while this is certainly true, it's equally true that television is capable of turning out series which transcend the label of mere entertainment and become actual art. So there's a special poignancy in those TV series which show us exceptional promise only to be canceled way before their story was completely told. Shows which were gone too soon. Hi guys, welcome back to Stone Cold Prose, where we build better words, better thoughts, and better men. I'm Miles Watson, novelist and author of numerous award-winning series including Cage Life, Sinner's Cross, and The Chronicles of Magnus. I worked in Hollywood for 10 years, law enforcement for 12, maybe I think I have that backwards, whatever. It's a lot of time. And now I break it all down and build it back better. So let's get into this with our third installment of TV shows who died way before their time. First up is Werewolf, 1987 to 1988. This little piece of costume jewelry is virtually forgotten today. You won't find it on any streaming services, and it was never officially released on DVD. Poor quality bootlegs and YouTube videos are the best you will get in this regard. How things change. Because back in 1987, Werewolf was an integral part of Fox Network's first ever broadcast lineup. And in its own way, it was quite the innovation. First and foremost, it was a horror series, which remains a rarity on network television. But it was almost unheard of back then. Second, it was shot in half-hour format, which in the 80s was used almost exclusively for situation comedies then as now. Because of this, the show felt and looked very different from anything else on television at the time. Werewolf was the story of Eric Cord, played by John J. York, who's a college graduate who gets bitten by a lycanthrope and discovers the only way to free himself from the curse of transforming into a slobbering, bloodthirsty monster is to track down and kill the originator of his werewolf bloodline. That is Janos Scorsese, played by Chuck Connors. As he hunts Scorsese, he himself is tracked by a bounty hunter named, get this, Joe Rogan, played by Lance Legault, one of the great go-to character actors of, well, all time. Now, if this sounds like a furry version of the Hulk, you're right. The premise is exactly the same, right down to the fact that Cord is a wanted man who wanders from town to town, pursued from without and cursed from within. What's more, at that stage of his career, John J. York, I have to say this, was one of the worst actors ever to step in front of a camera. When he talks, even when he handles a prop, he's absolutely unconvincing and he has all the acting rage of a wood block. Some of the episodes are trash, and while the special effects are actually quite good for 80s TV, they had some very heavy hitters in the FX department, including people I worked for many years later, the show was only intermittently frightening. Having said all this, the werewolf mythology was quite well thought out. Lance Legault was a great anti-villain antagonist. Many of the guest actors were first-rate, and Chuck Connors had the advantage of actually looking and sounding like a werewolf without benefit of makeup. What's more, unlike the Hulk, Cord's werewolf did occasionally kill people. And if they all happened to be evil, well, that didn't make their eviscerations any less gruesome. This show was never going to be really good because York, God bless the guy because he's a great guy, was just a terrible actor at this point in his career. He did get better. But there were a number of really promising episodes that showed what it might have been able to accomplish if it had stuck around for just a few more years. Next up is Harsh Realm, 1999. Now in 99, Chris Carter was on a roll. The X-Files was still going strong, and Millennium hadn't yet been canceled. Approached by Fox to put together another series, he borrowed loosely from a graphic novel of the same name to create Harsh Realm, one of the most miscast and mismanaged good ideas anyone has ever had. Released after The Matrix, but in gestation well before The Matrix hit theaters, Realm is the story of Lieutenant Tom Hobbs, played by Scott Bairstow, a U.S. Army officer fresh from the fighting in Kosovo who is tapped by his superiors to enter Harsh Realm, a virtual reality program created by the U.S. Army, programmed to minutely replicate the real world for training simulations. In this case, his mission is to assassinate an opponent named Santiago, played by Terry O'Quinn. When he enters the simulation, however, he discovers the virtual world in a dystopian state. And even worse, quickly realizes that anyone who dies in Harsh Realm dies for real. Furious over being lied to but unable to escape, he tries to carry out his mission, picking up a foul-mouthed mercenary companion named, get this, Pinocchio, played by D.B. Sweeney, along the way. The two men, often at odds, pursue differing agendas while trying to kill the elusive Santiago, who set himself up as a warlord in Harsh Realm and actually plans to destroy the real world via nuclear holocaust so he can reign supreme in the virtual world of Harsh Realm. Anyone familiar with Chris Carter's work will recognize all of his trademarks here. Vancouver setting, superb cinematography and lighting, stylized, frankly often wooden dialogue, dark conspiracies, and a nebulous but very fertile mythology. Unfortunately, the show suffered from the very beginning from a questionable case of casting and a confusion of focus. Bairstow is just too flat to carry a TV series on his shoulders. Sweeney relishes his cigar-chewing role as a mercenary, but he doesn't really sell it. And the story hiccups from one idea to another without ever establishing a really clear-cut identity for the audience to latch onto. However, some of the episodes are pretty good, demonstrating just how truly flexible the format of this series could be. Harsh Realm is a mess, but it's a fascinating mess, with an almost bottomless well of potential stories that we never got to see. Only 9 episodes were shot and only 3 were ever aired. It's too bad. Had a lot of potential. Next up is Da Vinci's City Hall, 2005. One of the best television shows I ever watched on TV was Da Vinci's Inquest, a hard-hitting, brilliantly written and superbly acted Canadian TV series about an irascible, conscience-driven, alcoholic coroner named Dominic Da Vinci, played by Nicholas Campbell. For 7 years, this Chris Haddock-created masterpiece followed Da Vinci and his friends and enemies around Vancouver as Da Vinci investigated a long series of murders, accidents, and scandals, and also pushed a series of controversial social reforms on an often unwilling core of cops and politicians. A unique blend of the police procedural, the medical, and the forensic detective shows, while simultaneously taking on numerous causes, as Quincy used to do back in the day, it made for excellent viewing. It was so good that when it ended, Haddock decided to keep the story going by taking more or less the entire cast into a continuation spin-off called Da Vinci's City Hall. You see, the last few seasons of Inquest were increasingly political, and at the end, Da Vinci becomes a candidate for mayor. City Hall picks up a little while into his tenure as Vancouver's political chieftain. The series displayed a real relish for its brutal examination of city politics. The scandals, the backroom deals, the egotism, the personal vendettas, the cynicism and the corruption abound. And the series' protagonist has to walk a really fine line between pushing his forward-thinking agenda and falling into the various traps and ambushes his enemies have laid out before him. Being free of its procedural roots, City Hall was, in some ways, not every way, as good or better than Inquest. The complexity of its intrigues between politicians, businessmen, and city agencies was absolutely fascinating, especially from the point of view of an American looking at Canadian life. Unfortunately, City Hall debuted in Canada during a television strike and as a result was afforded almost no publicity. Few Canadians knew the show was even on the air, and its ratings were insufficient to justify a second season. Haddock is a resourceful man and tried to keep things going with a Da Vinci television movie called The Quality of Life. He was hoping for a whole series of these TV movies, a la the very successful Perry Mason TV movies of the 80s and 90s. Unfortunately, Quality was the only one ever produced. It's not streamed anywhere that I know of, and it's goddamn next to impossible to get your hands on a copy of it, though I did eventually by asking one of the actors on the show to give me theirs. This was a bitter pill for me to swallow when one considers just how damn good the political criminal universe Haddock built really was. If you think of like the West Wing crossed with The Wire, that's what this show was. Next we come to Rome, 2005 to 2007. HBO television has done some very good work over the years, but one of the best shows led to one of its stupidest decisions, the one to cancel what in essence was Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones even existed. Rome, set in the last years of the Roman Republic, when Julius Caesar was ushering in the Age of Empire, and told primarily through the eyes of 2 Roman soldiers, one a rigid, principled man named Varanus, and the other a vulgar, brawling monster named Pullo. The series, however, was hardly about Roman military life, but the incredibly complex webs of political and personal intrigue that wealthy Roman families, such as the Julii clan, had to navigate to maintain and expand their power. In the Game of Thrones, you win or you die, and there was a lot of dying in Rome, also a lot of torture and a lot of nudity. Intertwining with actual historical events, figures, and so forth, it showed the complexity, grandeur, cruelty, greed, and did I mention cruelty of the Romans in exacting detail? And anyone who considers the vicious, clever, powerful female a product of something like Game of Thrones might want to take a look at Polly Walker's terrifying performance as Atia of the Julii, a psychopath who will stop at absolutely nothing to protect her family's position, and I mean nothing. Actually, the acting on this show is superb all around. This is the show which, despite constantly killing its characters off with reckless abandon, I could have watched for 10 years running. Unfortunately, HBO deemed it too expensive and pulled the plug after just 2 short seasons, and has shown a baffling reluctance to either restart it or even give its true fans closure with a feature film the way they did with Deadwood. It's too bad, but we'll always have Pulo saying things like, "Here I come, girls. I'm going to drink all the wine, smoke all the smoke, and fuck every whore in the city." Stay classy, Pulo. Last up is Playmakers, 2003. Shows get canceled for a variety of reasons, from cost overruns to bad ratings to personality conflicts between showrunners and studios, but once in a while they don't just die, they get murdered. Playmakers depicts the lives of the Cougars, a fictional professional football team playing in an unidentified American city, which was actually Toronto, by the way. The show, which ran 11 episodes, was the first original drama series created by ESPN. And to quote one article I read in preparation for doing this video, although the ratings were very high for ESPN, Playmakers was the highest rated show on the network other than its Saturday night NFL and Saturday college football games. ESPN eventually canceled the series under pressure from the National Football League, who disliked the portrayal of the negative aspects of its players' lives off the field. Boy, did they dislike it, and I can understand why. The show depicted hardcore drug abuse, spousal abuse, closeted homosexuality that leaves the closet, and not to applause, men playing badly injured, and basically everything the NFL didn't want Johnny Q. Public thinking about at all. It's not that Playmakers was slandering the league, it was simply too honest for its own good. In essence, the NFL was so pissed that this show even existed that they told ESPN they would either cancel it or lose their NFL contracts. Thus, in the words of my friend Matt, Playmakers was taken out to the woodshed and not spanked, but shot. It's a great pity. Many of the scandals which later rocked the NFL were fictitiously depicted here, and one might say predicted here, in this one-season wonder gone way, way, way too soon. And by the way, I know NFL games aren't played on Saturday. I fucked that up. On that note, I bring the 3rd installment of Gone Too Soon to a close. There will be a part 4 and probably a part 5 because there are still more of these unfortunate examples. But I am experimenting with trying to be grateful for the things I have rather than bitter over the things I don't. And it seems to be working. So instead of extending a huge middle finger at the suits, bureaucrats, and assorted morons responsible for whacking these babies in their cradles, I'll just say thank you to the folks that brought them into existence in the first place. They didn't last long enough, but they sure as hell were fun when they were with us. Folks, if you enjoyed today's video, please remember to like, subscribe, comment, hit the notification bell, and remember to check out my books on Amazon. The link is never in the description because I always forget to put it there, but you can check for fun. I drop scripted content every Friday at 3 p.m., shorts almost every day, and unscripted rambles whenever rage moves me to do so. See you next time, and until then, stay cold and don't get canceled too soon.